toolbox. So let's get this thing started. Divorced at 50. Some of us are chronologically up there in the years. We are over 40, we are over 50, or we're reaching that pinnacle, if you would, because some of us didn't think we would make it. And there comes a time when not just men, but people have to start over. And starting over can be hard. Starting over can be tedious, can be taxing, can be anything but something that somebody looks forward to doing. Because when you thought you would have things going a certain way and life interrupts your flow and turns things around, what do? How do you react from it? How do you overcome it? And some of us on here, I think everybody on here, we've been through a marriage and gone through a divorce and had to get beyond that. But at the greater ages, you tend to think about it, tend to react a little differently. And on this topic tonight, we'll be talking about this. We'll be opening it up, dialoguing it, looking at what you guys have to say, as well as bringing out information and personal stories and testimonies that can help you, whether you're going through or whether you know somebody that's going through this very topic. So, and now remember, each and every person on this panel is an expert of their own opinion. May not be an expert on how you see it, but on how we see it, we know exactly the points that we're trying to bring out and how, trying to bring this thing through to where we can all receive some information that'll help us in the long run. Okay, brothers, first and foremost, I think this question is one of those that's going to get the bases running. Go get us on first, second, and third. So question, how does divorce after 50 impact a Black man's sense of identity, purpose, and masculinity?
So for clarification, are you asking this question as he's getting divorced at 50, or maybe he got divorced at 40 and he's still divorced at 50?
As a person, I say in your later years, because we stuck the number 50 there, but in your later years, your mentality of going through a divorce, going through that whole process of how you're handling it when it comes to those things.
All right. So I got divorced and I'm 49. I got divorced in 2015, so 10 years ago. The way I was mentally at 39 is not the same person I am at 49. And I think even if I would have gotten divorced at 29, probably would have been way different than how I would have handled it now. So I think that back then, when I got divorced, I didn't have a real good sense of identity. I hadn't found my purpose yet. I was only somewhat in my masculinity, not fully. So I was a totally different person now. I don't have any plans or desires to be divorced for the remainder of my life. If that was to happen, for the sake of this conversation, I know who I am now. I know my purpose, and I am in my masculinity. So it wouldn't impact these things as much for me. And I'm speaking just for me, not for all, 50-year-old men. I know that we're definitely going to talk about the other side of that. But just right now, for me starting this conversation, I think that right now I would be okay. I know who I am. I'm good with my purpose, my masculinity, and all these different things. I have some discipline and some consistency and some self-help and self-improvement things going on in my life that I think on the surface, speaking, not looking forward or ever seeing myself in this situation, that's kind of how I want to start this conversation. I think I'd be okay.
Oh man. So I'm not going to attempt in this conversation to pretend like I can put my mind into being 50 and have gone through what I've gone through at 28 and 39 or whatever, you know what I mean? But I am making clear assumptions because at my age, I've realized some things may have been easier going through divorce depending on the narratives, right? At 50, you can have teenage kids, young kids, or you can have adult kids. The children sometimes play a part because when you identify yourself as a father, when your kids are grown, you already who you are to your children as grown children, as a father of grown children. But when young children are taken out of your house and out of your life, it changes your identity as a father. How do I show up without being present? How do I be a father without being able to be a disciplinarian, without being able to be impactful in their everyday life? I think these are the conversations we don't really have. Oh, you don't know, you're not a good father. I'm like, and I'm not gonna lie. When my children first left my house, my identity was I am not really a father. I'm just a figurehead so that they don't feel like their father didn't love them. I'm present just so they don't have that feeling, but I'm not really a father because I don't have a say in absolutely none of their life uh, until they get old enough to decide whether or not they want to hear about my opinion. My opinion don't really matter to them. Only thing that really matters is the child support check and that they see me fighting, right? Which is 9 times out of 10 is a losing battle. So like that plays on your identity as a father and in that same space. And this is why I say it depends, because if your children are older, I can't speak on that. My son is about to start high school next year. So call me in a few years when it comes to adult children. But when it comes to the masculinity, it plays there too, because you're told unless you're trying, even though the battle you're about to get into, they're gonna tell you 9 times out of 10, they're gonna tell you lost unless the mother's really down and out, uh, or done something wild. So you're like not really a man if someone gets to dictate how the rest of my life is spent, how the rest of my how this goes and this goes. Now I don't really have a say in my own family and my own family's upbringing, my own family's life and decisions made about for my family. Because once I divorce you, you're gonna do what you want to do. You're not my responsibility, but those kids are my responsibility. But they are not my responsibility. So all these things, it plays in a man's head, and I know a lot of times we don't care about that because they got their mama, so we cool. But these are the things that and then purpose, like I think is all to me is all tied together, right? When we talking about divorce, because it's a family breaking down. So what purpose? And these are questions I asked myself in my 30s, like what is my purpose if I don't if I'm not allowed to be involved in my children's lives? If I'm being limited, relegated to being a father 4 days a month, less than 100 days a year, but that's like so all the only thing I'm doing, I'm just showing face so that they don't see me break down. I'm showing up so that they know I love them and I care. But the reality is there's a great chance that they grow up and have no identity that they're a gaddy, that they belong to me. They'll look strictly like their mama and their mama family. And those are the things that's just the mental part. I'm done.
Gaddy, what's your age?
39. You got me by 10 because I'll be
39.
40 in December.
Okay.
Okay, I thought it was going to be more to go along with that. So this is a very complicated question, first of all, because there are several layers intertwined within it. First, when you look at identity, there are several categories under that. Those who know their identity, those who don't know their identity, those who've assumed a false identity, those who have a clear depiction of their identity. So those 4 different categories for starters. Then you got to understand that those who conflated their identity with fatherhood, to where now fatherhood gives you more clarity of identity. But again, all that fits in. So within the scope of those 5 categories I just named, if I don't have a clear understanding of who I am, then going through a divorce, especially after the age of 50, makes me even more confused, because at one point in time I found my identity in what I was doing with my family, my children, and things of that nature. If I do have a sense of identity, but it's a false identity, now I'm probably kind of relating to the statistics that fall in line with this false identity that was given to me. Then if I do have a clear sense of my identity, it doesn't change my identity. It just changes the amount of energy that I put in, the efforts that I have to do to still be, because getting the divorce doesn't change the fact that you're a father. It just changes the access that you have to the children, especially if I can't prove her to be an unfit mother, which in most cases, that's probably how you're going to get custody, unless she just gives you custody, or you go to court and the judge says that the children have a better opportunity in life with the father. But then you look at what you're going to put those children through to be able to do that, right? Um, and then you look at those who find their identity in the fact that they are a father. So when they get a divorce and they lose custody of their kids, now you have no identity because you feel lost without your kids. That's just the identity piece. Purpose looks the same, especially if I don't understand my purposes. My purpose is me being a father, all of those different things. So it starts to look the same with purpose. Masculinity, in my opinion, is different, because me being married or divorced, with my children, without my children, don't change what I view when it comes down to me being a male, a masculine man, or whatever that looks like. So that's why I say there's several layers to this question, and it can create a lot of confusion when it comes down to just this one particular topic.
Exactly, and I think that's where I figured. I said, man, with just this, we could talk about this for the whole show, because it's nuanced and it's layered to where you can just focus on identity and spend 30, 40 minutes talking about identity. Because like what Gaddy is talking about when he's talking from a 39-year-old, I think he's in a certain place identity wise that these other three, bro, we 50, 49, and 50 plus. So whereas he's still searching and he's still finding himself in certain aspects and areas of life, we've already been there. We've already experienced that. So there are certain things as a 50-year-old, because that's what we talk about, divorced after 50. I think when I was divorced at 30, early 30s, my mentality was, okay, next. That was my mentality. And not thinking about what I was going to get myself into, not thinking about, I knew, okay, I already knew, okay, the court going to say the kids go with her, and I'm going to have to pay child support. I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to do these things. I was thinking more along of those things, where at this young age of 51, going on 52, now my mentality says, man, properties, land, stocks, bonds. Now I'm thinking about, okay, so now my mentality started to shift about what's going on, because at the end of the day, I don't need a roommate. I don't need a friend. I don't need that part. So I think when you're younger, you're thinking about, oh, I need a companion. And sometimes, and as we go along during this conversation, we'll open up to where the identity, the purpose, and the masculinity aspect will be shown through other things of how we're viewed in society, how we're viewed in other systems of culture. So let's roll over the number.
Yeah,
Yes.
I kind of wanna, if we can, kind of sit at the identity piece. You know what I mean? Because I think, everything kind of ties back to that. And I think Coach was saying some things about that made a lot of sense, and then you kind of talked about how we could just talk about identity, because, as I'm looking at this, like how you see yourself, your identity is in a lot of cases determines what decisions you make and which direction you decide to go and how you handle things, so that, because I have a couple of guys right now who fit this right here. You know what I mean? And they are two different types of men who are going through this, and it's interesting to have some of the conversations about how, after being married for so long and then now being 50 and now going on the dating scene is different than it was, um 15 years ago, 20 years ago. There's phones now, there's people that can record certain things, there's things you have to be careful for. There's still things that we had to look out for back then, but maybe some of the things have changed. You know what I mean? But I don't want to get too far off topic, but just our identity and how we move, like Coach said, really affects how we treat and handle the overall divorce. So I don't know. It just, I guess I just kind of want to know on the identity bone for a little bit more, because I just kind of felt like it was a little bit more there before we moved on. But again, I don't want to steer the conversation.
Oh, let's see. I hate when I get it small. So the premise of a man's identity. So is the premise of a man's identity a correlation with their age and experience? Heck of a question. That's thrown out there.
I think every aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think every aspect of a man's life, it kind of alters a bit with age and with experience. I think as men, right, and my brothers, y'all could, tell me to keep living, and I don't understand it yet, but you just help me out. But as men, as we get older, what I saw myself at 30 changed a little bit at 35, right? And especially if I go back to talking about 20, 25-year-old me, even though I still wore the uniform, but who I was as a man was different. And as I grew, like Rose said, as I keep getting older, I start finding more about myself. Whether I'm searching for understanding myself or not, I find that there's more aspects to me as a man than just this one area, or just this area, or And so as we grow and as we get older, we have analyzed such a vast space of manhood, and we've gone through, especially when we talk about divorces, especially those of us who divorced before 50 and been divorced again on our way to 50. You learn something through each one of those phases. Yeah, every time you walk out of a relationship, your identity kind of either grows or changes somehow, some way. So that's how I look at it.
I wouldn't say that the premise of a man's identity is, but I would say part of a man's identity definitely correlates with their age and experience. However, it also depends on some other things as well. Knowledge, information, lessons learned, not just age. You got a whole bunch of old fools out there. You know what I mean? You got a lot of people with experience, but they didn't do anything with the experience. They didn't learn. They didn't apply certain lessons learned from the experience. So I would say that, yes, these are two pieces of part of a man's identity, but I don't think that this is the premise. And again, I am an expert of my own opinion.
Speaking of being an expert of my own opinion, no, absolutely not. However, when you look at the bad information that came before you, that's what you think. Because every older man you talked to when you was young highlighted the fact that you was young and you ain't lived long enough to go through the experience. Your experience don't make you more of a man. Your age don't make you more of a man. That's one of the biggest mistakes that we've made in our society, in our community, right? We think because a person is senior. They know better, right? But I think for the most part, when we really start peeling back the layers of things, just because they were older, like they did a thing, the thing that they did probably wasn't right. And we're learning that. We've learned that when it comes down to parenthood, when it came down to all these other different things. And so what ends up happening in response now, you hear, well, I did the best that I could with what I had. No, you just did what you did at that particular point in time because that's what you knew. But that bit of information applies to every man, every woman, regardless of whatever their age is. So does identity correlate with age and experience? No. Age and experience only refine the information that you know based upon your identity and gives you evidence of what you thought you knew about yourself.
I like how you put that. I think that when it comes to the premise of a man's identity, does those aren't the only two factors, but I think they do hinge on that, because when you're looking at where you are now, it came from what you've experienced, what you've gone through, and what you've learned along the way, and whether or not you matured along the way. Because you can be old, because my grandmother used to always say old fool and other kind of fools, but you can be old and still be immature. So age and experience doesn't necessarily mean that but it may be I think when you don't know who you are, you'll fall in line with that, and you'll simply go along to get along, and you'll fall in line to what people say, who people say you are, or what society says you should be, or you think like the running things on social media say, well, men are providers and men are this. So now you say, okay, I'm a provider, and you'll put yourself in that mold instead of saying, man, I'm more than. If I'm more than this, stop trying to put me in the box of that. But we will do it on our own. So when that premise, I like how Coach put it, and I'll rock with him all day and twice on Sundays with that one, because when you look at things, the identity of me doesn't solely come from those two things, because my experiences can lead me to think of myself in a certain way that may lead me down the wrong path.
And Coach, to your point, I think also sometimes those older guys gave us information that was valid when they were 20. You know what I mean? Just like sometimes I found myself telling my sons, hey, look, this is how you get money, yada, yada, yada. But there are other ways to do it too. So now when I give information, I also let them know, hey, look, this is how I did it. There's also other ways of doing it. And sometimes you might have to say, Dad, look, shut up. I got this. I'm doing it this way. And by the way, it has been successful, and maybe you should get on board, So I think you were right about that. And I also think that sometimes those older guys was just giving us outdated information.
And you talk from a perspective of people whose identity was based on culture of that time and what they learned, so they could only show you how to become who they are. So that's why you can't necessarily walk. I can't walk in Coach's shoes or your shoes or Gaddy's shoes. I got to walk in my own shoes. And that's why I stuck maturing in there. Because if you haven't matured, I don't care how old you can be, 50, you can be 60, you can be divorced, you can be married. If you haven't matured, you'll give out false information when it comes to young bucks and their married life or their parenting skills. You'll give false information as if it's true, but it's coming for you. So it's your truth because of your sometimes damage. Let's get to the next question. In what ways do the emotional silence or suppression that many Black men experience after divorce affect their health, relationships, and ability to move forward? I'll jump on this one. I think when you look at health, when you look at when you don't know your identity and you put your all into, oh, I'm a father, you're all into, I'm a husband, and you don't necessarily know who you are, when you lose those things that you've placed yourself into being, now you don't know what you're going to do. It's like, what am I going to do with myself? Because you wake up every morning and you know, oh, I got to do this and I got to do that. And instead of knowing who you are, you know what you do, and you've made yourself into what you do instead of who you are. So that can be mentally straining. That could be one of those things where I don't have my family here, so I don't know how I'm going to make it. Or I don't have this. And you start looking at what you don't have instead of what you do have and who you are. So that's one of those things where relationships that follow after, when you don't know who you are, you'll start to try to put them in the place of what you lost instead of who they are. And it can be damaging to relationships going forward as well.
I think all of that, and I think that when you're 50, when you're that age, and especially if you're somewhat established, man, you have some success, you know, you may have some financial success, you may have, you know, a lot of things going for you in your life. You know, you may feel at some point that you may have a decent wife, you may have a decent family, and then not necessarily all of a sudden, but you get to a point in your life where there's something that you can't control. And that is the fact that you could be with someone and at some point they decide that they want to move in a different direction. Well, 15, 20 years ago, that wasn't on the table. You know, we had decided that this is what we were going to do. So my intentions and the way I've been moving for the last 15, 20 years have been in this direction. And now, because you, for whatever reason, not pointing fingers, you have decided that, or we have decided that this is where we're going to go. So now at 50, trying to maneuver and trying to do something and change course after something you've been doing for 20 years can definitely have an effect on health, relationships, ability to move forward, and all of those things. You know, when, like I said, when part of your identity or some of your identity may have been tied, whether it's good or bad, some of your identity may have been tied to being a husband, and now you are no longer there. So I definitely think it can affect all of those things until you get to a point to where you can move forward. I think all of those things and plus other things can be affected. Like, you know, even relationships, you know, having conversations with people and, you know, they can't always understand how you feel, you know, and then you may have the other side who's telling you, you know, everything that you want to hear. So I definitely think it can have an effect on relationships as well.
I think a big part of it depends on the man. I don't know how everybody thinks, right? But I do see the word suppression though, but I'm gonna go to the word silence, because not all silence is suppression. Sometimes silence can be focus or refocus. And so I can get a divorce and go, you know what? I'm never doing that again. Not the marriage or the relationship, but the divorce. And so now I start to now try to analyze life differently, starting with myself, because something that all of you brothers said is true. My identity was wrapped up between being a father and a husband. And when you no longer have that surrounding you, it goes back to that purpose piece. So, you know, because a part of it's like, hey, the only reason why I work this hard, the only reason why I put on this uniform every day, the only reason why I ran those miles every day, did them rucks, got blown up, got shot at, you know, was because I had to put food on the table, because I had these mouths to feed, because I wanted to make sure I gave you a life that you can be proud, or whatever the case may be, you know, however every man thinks differently, right? And so, but now it's like, that was who I was, that was my purpose, that was my identity, That's how I identified myself as a man, because my kids was taken care of and my lights was never turned off. There was food in the house. That I did that, right? But I can't identify myself as that first, because when I don't have that, then who am I? And so silence can sometimes be understanding that. Now who am I? Now what do I look like when when I wake up every day, when I walk out this door and I walk out and there's nobody behind me, when I come back in the house and I don't hear the screams of daddy's home when I get through the door. Who am I now? What does my life look like? Do I just go on an endless amount of grinds to make endless amount of money? Is that who I am now? Do I go on this on these major dissertations of how jacked up women, men, or relationships are, the world are? Is that who I am now? Like, so I have to. So part of it can be a refocus. So I got all right. So I gotta dump all of that stuff. I gotta dump all that, and sometimes I gotta go through the emotional roller coaster so I can dump the emotional roller coaster that came from the separation and the divorce. Let me get through. Let me process through this. Let me feel what I'm feeling. Now let me push it aside so that refocus can take place, so that there is an opportunity for relationships in the future. May or may not be romantic, which also caters to move forward. What does move forward? Does move forward mean find the next? Like Rose said, when you're young and you get divorced, is next. And that's the mindset. Or maybe at this stage in my life, it's I ain't got time for none of y'all. All I got time for is what I got on my plate. And now I'm trying to, I'm just bam, bam, bam. I'm laying things out for what life looks like going forward. And maybe I don't want another romantic relationship. Maybe I don't want to. I want to kick it with my boys, talk on Fridays, serve the Most High, and chill and watch. I want to be like Roland one day. I want to be able to watch all the TV shows on TV in one day, in between him and Coach. But I swear, there ain't nobody seen more TV than them two. But I'm joking. Yeah, I threw you in there.
I feel attacked right now. I feel attacked. Somebody said that this is a loaded question, and they're absolutely right. And so when you look at the load in the question, there's a piece in this question that is missing that precedes the question, because it says, in what ways do the emotional silence or suppression that many black men experience? Trust and believe that silence and suppression comes from someplace first. That thing that exists first is the thing that men experience. The result of it becomes silence or suppression. What is the thing that most men experience before the silence and suppression come? The thing where a black man attempted to express himself, and it, because of the false identity of provider and protector, men are not supposed to feel. Men are not supposed to express how they feel. Oh, what you're saying, it's not that serious. You're making a big deal out of nothing. So when that existed in the relationship, and now the relationship or marriage has now come to an end, on the backside, why would that man feel proactive to express how he feel or unleash what's on the inside of him? He's been taught, not just in that relationship, but really it's more of a societal norm, that little boys don't cry. Little boys don't have feelings. Girls have feelings. Y'all remember the old nursery rhyme? You know, girls are sugar and spice and everything nice, and boys are frogs and snails and puppy dog tails. So girls are described and depicted from a perspective of this entity that has the freedom to express their emotions and warm and loving and all of that other great stuff. But little boys are totally different. They're depicted as something rough around the edges, tough, can deal with anything. So a man will literally carry the world on his back. Not saying that women don't, but at the end of the day, nobody feels sorry for him. In fact, I would say it like this, because it's said in the male circles, ain't nobody gonna come and rescue you. So we get what you're going through, but keep it to yourself. Suck it up. Drive on. Deal with it. It ain't that bad. It'll be okay. You trust me. You'll find you a new one eventually. Don't worry about it. It ain't that bad. It's all right. So when we start looking at this emotional silence and suppression, it existed deep within his psyche because no one ever made room for him to express himself. So now, after the divorce, when we start looking at health implications, right? Well, it's an old saying, pressure bust pipes. Right. So what's the pressure? High blood pressure. What's the pipes? Those blood vessels. Heart attack, heart disease, all those things start tying in. Relationships, I done been down this road before. I don't know if I'm really wanting to open myself up like I did to this last one. Wow, so I can go through the same thing again. I've seen this movie before. It didn't work out too well in the last one. I don't want to be the star. I'm gonna be the co-star. I'm gonna sit on the back and just go half in, half out. I'm not gonna really be committed to it. And then the ability to move forward. Move forward for what? I'm just saying. This is what society created. This monster that society has been talking about for years, you created that monster. And I'm not trying to shuck responsibility. That's not what I'm doing. I want to paint a holistic picture because when society painted the picture, our culture accepted it and ran with it.
Coach. I'm telling you in my notes, man, because I wrote down no one really checks on men because they don't because we it's almost as if you don't care. If you see two people arguing, it's automatically you somebody crying, both of them could be crying. You go into the woman's defense. So that man has learned through the years that nobody cares, nobody come to save me. So I will hold it in. I'll suppress this anger, this rage, whatever I'm feeling at the time, because what they gonna do about it? Ain't nobody gonna help me. So that's why you have those issues of high blood pressure and all these other things and then we turn to substances sometimes because when you don't know who you are, you tend to find yourself in a bottle. You tend to find yourself in another woman. You tend to find yourself in something else to mask what's actually going on with you so you won't have to deal with it. Instead of learning how to deal with those things. That's why therapy is therapeutic for a reason, because now you can deal with what's going on with the internal before it shows up externally so that you won't have a reaction just like his divine just said and boom. And Abe said something earlier, Coach. Societal expectations for men to be stoic can make it harder to seek help, which limits their ability to move forward. That's the truth. Society teaches us just like women in relationships teach you if you can or can't actually talk. She can say, well, you can tell me everything. And then you start telling her something and she automatically starts trying to combat everything that you're saying instead of listening to what you're saying. So it's like, okay, now he knows. Okay, I can't talk about that with her. That's how society has taught us. That's why it teaches us to be stoic. Like, okay, I'm gonna sit here and just listen. And people are like, oh, don't let it bother you. But deep down inside, he's bothered. Deep down inside, he's in a rage because he has some things that he hasn't worked through. So you say, okay, when he gets to a certain age, why aren't you like this? Because he doesn't necessarily know who he is yet. He know who he is in the capacity of husband and capacity of father, but in the capacity of Dwayne or Gaddy or Garfield or Roland, we don't know that unless we take the time to get to know who we are, because our identity can't be locked up in who we are with another person. Because if it's tied into that, then we'll always be in the whirlwind of emotion, a whirlwind of ups and downs, because we don't necessarily know. So that starting over will terrify us. So it terrifies those that aren't going through the cycle of healing within first.
Hey,
Well,
yeah, I agree. I agree, but I will. Is it society's expectation for men to be stoic or just quiet? Because I don't see it as the same thing. Being stoic is not a bad thing. Being silent and quiet and grinning and bearing it and just accepting it is. That's what society expects, not stoicism. Again, stoicism isn't bad. right? And I know sometimes we talk about stoicism as though it's a bad thing. It's not. Knowing when to be stoic is a good thing. But when you look at the narrative, right, the narrative, and if you pay close attention, is clear and loud. The narrative is for men to be quiet, for men to not say anything, for men to not voice their opinion. That's the narrative. The narrative is that don't give the man the microphone, give the microphone to the woman because we want to hear what she has to say. That's the narrative. That's not stoicism. So I can appreciate what Abe is saying, and I got you, bro. But I would just crank it up just a little bit, right? I'm not saying that you're wrong. What I'm saying, I'm cranking it up just a little bit. Society expects men to be quiet, and that's the issue. When men be quiet, our culture suffers. When men actually take an active role in the culture because the culture accepts the voice of the man, now the culture has the opportunity to strive. Not, and again, not this is not against women. However, it's something that needs to be heard. Stoicism and being quiet ain't the same thing.
I'm glad you said that because and that's why people will make the correlation between silent and stoic and think that they're one and the same. When you're stoic, you're actually thinking, you're pondering what's going on, you're actually getting ready for something. It's not that you're just silent and holding things in. But I think that's what sometimes the correlation between silent and stoicism goes that route.
I think what's the worst part to me of this part of the conversation is this is nothing new. This is nothing that our society doesn't know, right? When we talk about the expectation for men, and Coach, that's exactly what I was going to jump out and say, right when you said it, when we unmuted it at the same time, because I was going to say the same thing. It's not stoic that they're telling us to be. They're telling us to shut up and deal with it, and that has become the narrative, right? And sometimes the conversation gets hard to have because as men, we don't really want to do the women versus us thing, you know. But like Coach said, sometimes some things just got to be said, sometimes to be heard, right? Because a lot of times, the expectation is that women get to do, say, and treat men however, and if a man reacts to it or tries to correct it, he's not masculine. He's in his feelings. He Are you a man, deal with it, or whatever the case may be. And that creates a silence that no one likes, because now when you want that man opinion and he doesn't have one, he has one, but when you've shared with me that your ability to do what you want to do is more important than me having that opinion, that man will shut up because it's wasted energy. And that's something that as we get older and as we deal with more stuff that we ain't trying to have, which is wasted energy. And this is why you see some men who get divorced in older age be happy alone. Some of them be happy alone because no one wants to go through the rigmaroles again of emotional gymnastics. So you just sometimes it's easier to reserve that energy and sit back, because we have these conversations. Society knows this is true. We know this is what's going on. Every time we have this conversation, we see, is always full agreements, but I think mentally the world is not ready to do anything about it, because it's a comfort zone for most people. They're comfortable with us being silent. They're comfortable with us dealing.
I think we may be in between questions and, kind of Abe's point. So if I may I interject a pivot? All right. So I want to speak to the other side of this, of the divorce after 50. And I know we're talking about terrifies men. I get that. But real quick, I want to speak to the other side of that. During the pandemic and all of that stuff, there was a lot of people speaking on how bad it was for so many people. I thrived during the pandemic. The pandemic was great for me. So I want to speak to the other side of the divorce at 50. There's some dudes out there that is happy to get rid of that person they've been with for a long time. And these dudes is thriving and they see it as another opportunity to go and do better. I thought when I got married at 20 years old that I was going to be married forever. When I got divorced 19 years later, I did go through a period that I didn't want to be married and didn't want to be in a relationship, but then things changed and then I wanted to be in one. And one of the things that I said that I was going to do the second time was I wasn't going to make those same mistakes. I was going to learn from things. This was I was not the best husband during my first marriage. This was another opportunity, not just for me, but for me in a sense to prove to myself that, you're better. That who you was in that first relationship doesn't define who you are. And this relationship is a lot better. So I just want to speak to the guys who are, not necessarily happy or glad that they got on, but that they were in relationships and they didn't know that those relationships were holding them back. And now that they have been divorced and they have that new zest or zeal or whatever for life, and they have their purpose and identity is a lot more balanced and whatever like that, they can be a better version of themselves, and they are better versions to be a better version of themselves for the lady that they choose to be with. So I think that, I just wanted to speak to the other side of that. I know, like I said, we're talking about over 50 terrifies me and stuff. But again, I do think that I know that there is another side of that of men who are actually looking forward to the opportunity to finding, that special person, and then moving off into the sunset and different things like that. So I just wanted to make that 2 cents. Say that 2 cents.
I'm glad you added that to it. I think we're going to skip 3 and we're going to jump to the next question. What role does community play in either supporting or isolating divorce? And this is men and women after 50. It just so happened that we all are those people in the range of that color scheme, as what they say up on the panel.
Man, someone mentioned, there ain't a lot of spaces for men to go to get help and support, and that we don't always want it. Is society expects us to hold different things in. I get all of those things, but so I would speak for myself, and I would speak for the men, around 40, the unks, the OGs, and different things like that. I would speak for us older men, because we're talking about people being around 50 years old, divorcing. I would like to assume that their peer groups and their friends and stuff are probably right around the same age. So for me, as someone who's approaching 50 here in a few more months, my community and what I believe that we should be doing as a community is being a support for them. Because some of us have been through divorces, and we've had a lot of. By the time you hit 50, you didn't hit a lot of life experiences, and you should have learned a lot of lessons in there and obtained some knowledge that you can use to help and support your brother or whoever that's going through this at the time. So I think that as a role individually, if nothing else, we can reach out to the people to our left and right, or people that we can have direct access to, and just be a support for them. We don't necessarily always have to guide them and give them advice. Sometimes just being there listening, sometimes steering them to, hey, look, I get it, everything you got going on right now, you probably need a life coach, or you probably need, the mindset coach. Go on whatever and book them, and have some sessions and talk about different things and figure out how you can get to where you want to be. You know what I mean? So I think as a community, we need to be actively trying to support people that are going through these things, because they are hard. And the last thing we do need is people walking around unlifing themselves because of all of the different things that they're going through in the divorce. Because like Gaddy highlighted earlier, there's a lot of different things that go on there. There's limited amount of access that may go into you being able to see your child or getting certain information if the child is not with you. So I just think being an active supporter, reaching out to those people that you have direct access to, and being a support system for them while they are transitioning through the divorce process.
So, very unpopular response coming. The same role they were playing when they were in the relationship. The community role doesn't change. That's the issue that I have with these makeshift perceptions of community. If you are actively in a community, not just the community being actively in you, but like you are actively in the community, the role of the community doesn't change. The community, everything that you just heard Unc said, the community should have been that before the divorce even happened. It should have been that for him and her at the exact same time. Don't change up when the divorce happens. Let me say it again. Don't change up when a divorce happens. That talks to your character if you are part of that community, right? If you start isolating this particular person because, well, their relationship didn't work out or whatever the case may be, you might be a bad apple in that community. You probably need to be in the community of self because you really don't mean nobody no good. And I hope I ain't talking to nobody out there, but if it is, I'm talking to you, right? I'm just gonna call a spade a spade. Community is community. It doesn't change because your status changed. So you, whatever you're supposed to be, everything the Unc just said, all that support, all of that listening ear, all of that guidance, all of that help that the community should have been from Jump Street, it should still be that when the divorce happens.
I don't know if that was unpopular, Coach, because my response was going to say if the community was playing a role in supporting the marriage, there'd be less divorces. And that's just my opinion, right? Like, we see couples and we think that they're happy and they good, and so we don't have no support to give them. I think we have been conditioned as a people to only know how to show support to things that are broken. I don't believe that we know how to support things that are together. And then I don't even know if we know how to notice when things are falling apart. So what ended up happening is we've only valued, I don't want to say value. We've only been taught how to show up in a world or in a space where things have broken apart, when things have fallen apart, when someone is down, someone does feel like unalive. And like when we take that we want to ask the question. I see your face. I hope I'm not bringing up.
You sounding like you're underwater.
Kung Fu fighting, bro.
Yeah. But I'll jump in until that get rectified. I think what role does the community play in either supporting or isolating? I think sometimes the community, depending on where our community is, I don't care whether it's your friends, whether it's your church organization, whatever you're in, sometimes, and I've experienced this where my community chose a side. And what they did, they usually choose the side of the fair sex, the woman side. So it's either shun you, push you out the way, and choose her. When I think that if Dwayne is my brother and he's married, he's not, but if he's married and him and sis split, I don't pick a side and say, well, Dwayne, my brother, she's no longer my sister. Me as community, now I just have two separate people to support. I don't try to piece them back together and try to be a matchmaker. I sit up there and support both. But what the community does is they say, well, she got the kids, and then they make him out to be a dog. They make him out to be the bad guy. You shouldn't have left your family. But they weren't in the fight, in the relationship, so they don't necessarily know what took place. And as men, we are in the business of exposing the other person. Like, okay, whatever, I suck that up instead of sitting up there. And then some of us, like myself, and I think some of these brothers on this show, we will put a brother or whomever in their place to let them know you don't have a nickel in this dime. So it's not your place to discuss my and her business. So I think sometimes the community doesn't do enough supporting of both parties. And whereas I know that in the Black community as a whole, if I'm teary-eyed, if I'm crying, I know that 9 times out of 10, there will be some reprisal. There will be some, even though I'm hurt, but I have a relationship with these brothers to where if I come to them and they see that I'm seriously hurting and crying, they're not going to dog me out about it. They're not going to sit up there and come with the jokes right away. Now, later on, after we've grown past that, they'll say, remember when? But that's after the healing process has started. Because I think all too often we look and see that, oh man, you shouldn't be crying anyway. Suck it up. Sometimes I can't suck it up. Sometimes I just want to talk to you and get it off my chest, not so that you can hug and pat me on the back, but sometimes I just got to release that thing. And we need people where we can have a release so that I'm not bottled up all the time. So my community is right here. My community ain't on social media where they telling me, oh, well, do this and do that. And I'm looking at social media for everything because I don't have a relationship with them. They don't have a relationship with me. So they can give sound information at times, or they can give information that I may think is sound, and it may not be right for where I am at that time. But those that I have their ear can listen to not just my voice, but listen to my heart.
I get the community, and I've been listening, and I like coaches rebuttal to my comment. And I want to add to that. I think into what everybody else said about the community. I think the community is only part of the problem. I think part of the problem are like Coach talking about the divorcees, the people in, and like you talked about too. Because I think part of the problem is the community is there, but sometimes we don't access the community that we have. We don't give the information to the community. We don't tell the community, hey, I'm going through this stuff. And for whatever reason, we don't always put our business out there, for whatever reason, hey, what happens in the house, stay in the house. We can work through this. We can do it on our own. For whatever reason, we don't always reach out to communities. And not just with stuff like this, but we have doctors and lawyers and coaches and fitness experts. We have all these people in our family, but a lot of in our community, but sometimes we don't want to reach out to people in our own community. So I know we're talking about the community, but some of that is that we got to do our part to put our hand in the community and say, hey, look, me and my wife, we going through some stuff. So that way the community can support us. Because I think, like I said, I think sometimes some of the lack of the support that we get in the community is because us not going to the community before we have the issues and stuff. We wait till things blow up. We wait till the divorce, and then we reach out too.
Can y'all hear me? Am I better? Mm-hmm. All right, I'm gonna try to talk quick before I start acting crazy again. I'm glad you said it, because then it allowed me a reason to go back and say what I was saying when I was acting crazy, glitchy. No, but I do not believe that as a community we know how to show up for people when things are together. We only know how to be a community or support for people when things fall apart. No one ever taught us how to support a healthy marriage. We only know how to support the marriage after it falls apart. Now we know how to go and help each other. Let me listen to you. Let me talk with you. But what about, hey, I think we should do game nights as a couple. I think we should do things so that we could talk, because the whole duration of the marriage is things going on that led to the divorce that didn't seem like big things, but because we had no one to to talk to it about these things, because didn't nobody want to hear it, because you're married. But now when y'all separated, living in different houses, oh man, I can't believe she did that. Oh man, I can't believe he did that. Oh man, you need a friend, or you need, no, I needed a friend when the marriage was together. I needed someone to tell me how to handle some of this craziness she was doing when we were together, because how you dealing with it, or are you dealing with it? And maybe we can help coach each other through this thing. Like, and I think for me, that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the community. Because if the community was involved, I said, I don't know if y'all heard me in the beginning, but if the community was involved before the divorce or during, just all the time, if we were a community to one another, maybe there wouldn't be as many divorces. And I
But
just
here's
believe
that part. I don't think, can we all agree that the community is in sync though? Right? So if you go to all four, if you say, Gad, if you reach out to Coach, me, and Roland, and you say, hey, me and my wife going through something, you're gonna get three different things. Coach can be like, yeah, man, you need to suck it up, go on and stand there. I'm gonna be like, man, you need to pray about that. And then Roland man, like, man, you need to go out there and go get you another woman. You know what I mean? So you may get three different, he said two. So you may go out there and you may get three different opinions. So I think I get, the community piece, but the community needs to be in sync. If the community is not in sync, then the information that they get from the community may not be good. Because like I said, just right here, all three of us is part of the community, but we may all have three different ways on how we believe things are run. You go to different communities, there's processes and procedures, how to handle certain things. You go to this culture, this is how we handle it. We go to this culture, this is how we handle it. But sometimes over here, we don't necessarily have a set of rules or a structure on how to handle certain things. So sometimes going to the community, you don't necessarily know what you're going to get either.
See, but I think you're making my point, because we're still talking from the aspect of the things being broken. What I'm saying is, if we knew how to be a community when things are together, maybe we have less things breaking. And that's where I'm at with it, because I'm gonna be honest, and I'm not trying to be funny. It's not that I like any brother here better. Y'all know, me and Roland, our relationship for the last 5 years, it's been my brother, right? Probably longer than, I don't know how long, right? But I know if in the midst of going through a divorce, I trust all you brothers, but my first stop is going to be Roland. You want to know why? Because in my marriage, he was there, right? And it's not that y'all. I didn't know you brothers, right, at the time in my life, but it's not a hit. I don't want nobody in the chat to think I'm hitting at any of these brothers, but Roland was a friend to me when my marriage was good. He was a friend to me when things were going bad. He was a friend to me when we went through transitions. He was a friend to me when we had kids. He was a friend to me at our birthdays. He showed up for, like, his wife and him broke bread with me and my wife when we didn't have problems. So naturally, the person I'm gonna go to when it falls apart is going to be, because he was that community. If we were that community all the time to each other, I think it changes the landscape of how we have this conversation, because now you're my community at all times, and maybe my marriage has a better chance, because I'm not just coming to y'all for advice on how to handle divorce. Y'all could have gave me advice on how to handle the marriage.
And that's why I said what I said in the beginning. The community front role doesn't change. It is the exact same whether the relationship is healthy or not. And that's the issue. We struggle collectively on what community look like and how to function in community. We have this thing that we call community. It's like makeshift friendship. That's really all it is. Makeshift friendships. That's really what it is. But a healthy, functioning thriving community? We can, right? I think we can, but I don't know. Have you guys ever seen it? Right. Exactly.
Only in small pockets. You know what I mean? Just in small pockets
No,
of
no,
the
no, no,
community,
no.
but
I'm talking
not.
about you as a man. For a man, have you ever seen a functioning community that would be there for kind of like what Gaddy described? What he
Oh,
described what he and Roland friendship is like. Have you seen a collective of that?
oh, not a collective. No,
Exactly.
absolutely not.
Right. That's a friendship. He's talking. We're talking community where there's a collective of that description.
So
I
you
don't
can't.
think anybody on this panel can say it, or anybody in the chat can say they've ever seen that.
I would agree with you because I think that that's what we all tend to be looking for. We looking for exactly what you're talking about, Coach, because we, when we talk about community, usually we talk about the people we live next to, the people that we know by name, the people that we kind of associate with, and we arbitrarily make them our community when we don't necessarily know that they're in this fight with us from the jump. Not just when you find out something bad, because a lot of us we'll bake you a dish at mama's funeral, or we'll come to your aid when something goes on. But when it comes to actually the support, like I know, like if say Gaddy got all these babies, I know he got some needs some help with these babies. As a community, what we gonna do about it? Not just me, as a whole. So it takes the village is the community, but we're still searching for the village. And then here it's harder because a lot of us are transitionary where I'm not from Texas, but I live in Texas. I'm in, and everybody is other places. So now the familial aspect of it is totally different. So now you got to find a sense of trust in somebody and then get through that before you can reel them in and they become part of an actual community. Let's see. Lisa had made a statement earlier, Coach. I
I
believe
started.
there are healthy supports in marriage. We must make sure we place ourselves around healthy people. That's a start, definitely. But then I think you can't place yourself around healthy people and not be healthy, and people who love you enough to be honest. And I love that part because a lot of us we place ourselves around people who it's like they give us sugar water. You want the Kool-Aid. Sometimes you got to take that vinegar. And somebody got to tell you at times, hey, your stuff's stinking right now. Your slip's showing. And you got to have people in your life that care enough to not just watch you go out there and be dumb. Because a lot of us, especially in young marriages, we did a lot of falling, we did a lot of stumbling, and we weren't gonna listen to people. We didn't have anybody older in our corner that'll tell you, hey, sometimes if one of these brothers see me stumbling and they come and vigorously snatch me up for my good, I can't cry about it. I can't get mad. I got to suck that up. And that's why this whole divorce after 50 thing, you have to be in a place where you actually know who you are. And that's not saying you're perfect, but you know who you are. Because when you know who you are, now there's some things that you ain't gonna fall for. There's some things that you just okay, this right here ain't gonna get me. This ain't gonna take me out of pocket. If me and Unc, we have a little heated fellowship argument or something, it's not gonna make me, oh, I can't stand Unc. I'm blocking him from all my stuff. No, it's gonna make me go to Coach, and Coach gonna say, okay, let me call let me get both of y'all on the phone. Let's talk about this thing. Not let's sit up there and go back and forth. Because that's what we're used to, finding somebody that's gonna take our side. So when the divorce comes, I'm simply trying to find somebody that's gonna take my side because not knowing who I am terrifies me. Next question. how do these divorces affect our broader community, especially when it comes to generational wealth, legacy building, and family structure?
And this can be a killer. Like this can destroy, especially if one person has to spend a whole bunch of money, or give, donate, whatever you want to call it, to the other person every single month. I know a guy right now paying $1,800 a month for child support, right? So good, bad, or indifferent, had him and that person stayed together, stayed married, that $1,800 would have stayed within the family. Now that $1,800 is going somewhere else. And yes, at some point when the child turns 18, the $1,800 will go back in the pocket. But think about how much money could have been used for whatever, investing, whatever you want to do. And I'm not up here saying and advocating for people not to pay child support or anything like that. I'm just giving an example of a situation. But when it comes to legacy building, family structure, all of those different things like that, some of us up here are divorced. I am divorced. I am remarried. I live in North Carolina. My ex-wife lives in South Carolina. I have a son in Colorado. I have one in New York, and I have one in Louisiana. So now, and my sons are in the military. So if they want to come and visit mom and dad, now they got to go to North Carolina and they got to go to South Carolina. So now they have to make extra trips and all these different things. So when it comes down to family structure and people trying to have parties and all these different things, and there's a graduation, and we only get 4 tickets, so who get to go, and now the exes don't get to go, and the new wife and husband, so all of these different things and different negative things that can happen when we start breaking down the family structure, when the grandkids are going to come along, and now they're trying to split visiting grandma and granddad, because now y'all in y'all 50s, y'all grandparents, but y'all in 2 different locations. So divorce affects the broader community in so many different aspects. You know what I'm saying? Now, me and my wife, we at some point we're gonna move to Texas. So when we move to Texas, now we gonna be even farther away from my ex-wife. So now when they, right now we're only, a few hours away. They can come see her and drive to see me. They can come see me and drive to see her, but once we move out there, it's plane tickets. You know what I'm saying? So grandkids, it's just a lot of different things that can go on and that can get broken down with as the broader community, just when things when you have the divorce, it affects a lot of people, so, and then sometimes when we bring new people in, they ain't always as welcome into the community either. So but that's another whole topic for another day.
Um, with the even with the fear of contradiction, I'm still gonna say what I got to say. We need to stop pretending like divorce doesn't separate the community. Rose said earlier, we got to learn to support both sides. That's ideal. But there's some people in this community because they are married to someone who was already in this community. And there's going to be people who are going to excommunicate them from the community when they divorce the person that brought them into the community. You get what I'm saying? Like, and it changes the way everything function community wise, right? Because what do I do? What do I do when the kids are over here, the daddy's over here, and the daddy's a part of the community, but the mama moved back to her old community with the kids. So the kids don't feel the support from this community unless the kids come out for the summer. Then they know what it's like to be, with daddy's family. But if they don't get summers, they don't get to really see daddy's family. They don't really know what it's like over here in this community, in this walk. Whether the community is not even blood family, but it's his whatever, So we've created we created brokenness, and that's just what it is. We broken family. We broke a family. It happens. It's our everyday life here today, but it's the reality. It's something that is broken. How does it affect? It affects everything. Because and here's the thing that sucks, because we always try as men to meet every aspect that we can. But one of the hardest things to come to the realization was this: I can't try to put so much focus when I got so let's say I divorced and those kids and that wife is here, and I remarried and now I got kids with this wife. I'm putting so much effort in trying to show up for the kids who are not in my house, that the kids in my house get neglected. So so when we talk about legacy building, I'm trying to keep this legacy intact over here, and I'm destroying the one in my home. So now I got to ask myself, do I put more effort in my home or on the kids outside of my home, or do I? You get and everybody has a different opinion on that. And, that's why I think with one of those things, you can't really get too many different opinions. You got to find one to stick with it, because people are going to tell you differently. But those people who are not in that shoe cannot tell you got to put both effort to both kids. Because show me that is easier to say than it is to do it. Both. When you talk about generational wealth, if you got the money to build wealth for the next generation, you can do it. If you don't, you don't. You just got to be smart with the generational wealth thing, because I could lay money aside for my kids that's not in my house, but if I'm not teaching them money management because I'm not with them, they're gonna do whatever that they were taught to do with that money when they get it. But family structure, we broke it.
I'm disappointed in all y'all gentlemen. Y'all being nice. I'm just saying, y'all being nice. Some people can appreciate that. Let's start with family structure. Let's be completely transparent. This is something that dawned on me years ago. When you look at court fees, things of that nature, when it comes down to getting a divorce, why not? And I know that some states have this, but it's not really what it is. But why not focus on counseling for that couple, as opposed to making the divorce the option that they're going through? And in fact, counseling should have been the thing before then, right? But why do the divorce and make child support the viable option, and then claim that you're doing this in the best interest of the kids, when in all actuality the best interest of the kids is both mama and daddy being together? Now, I'm not saying that there aren't instances where mom and daddy just get to the point where they can't be together because they made a bad decision. I get that happens. But the best interest of the kids is both parents being together. So why not, as a larger entity, state, government, whatever, why not put money into that program to keep families together? Well, I'll tell you why. Because if I can destroy the family structure, then I destroy the legacy. And the legacy being destroyed, now the generational wealth will never happen. And so when you look at all of these different things, and we talked about this, Garfield and I, on Coach's Corner, and I say it here, I'm just not going to show the statistics to support what I'm saying. Even if Papa and Mama, even if they didn't have the money, at some point they probably gained the information, the knowledge base. Then they could teach the mindset to their children. Once the mindset is taught, then it can be put into practicality. Once that mindset is placed into practicality, now the ball of generational wealth can begin. How so? Because if I don't focus on retirement planning, and I focus on legacy planning. Legacy planning ensures what the scripture says, that a good man will provide for his children's children. Paul may not necessarily be that good man, but Paul provided the mindset that needs to be passed down from generation to generation. So now, not only are you teaching the mindset within the family structure, you're also teaching them how to employ it moving forward. That's the thing that we're missing. We never talk about that because we only talk about what's happening in the here and in the now, in the moment. Garfield, when you talked about $1,800 a month, that was me, bro. That was me as a Psalm first class in the Army. Every month, $1,800 a month, right? Now imagine trying to live life and do that at the exact same time. Imagine what that could have looked like if that was placed in some type of account for my children when they turn 20 years old. And then in the midst of that, teaching them the mindset that they need, that once they turn 20, they put that into play and continue to add to that. Because let's be completely transparent. Look at the younger generation. They ain't having kids. They're not choosing to have kids. Why? Because it's a threat to them, especially young men, because young men are fearful of child support. Pay close attention. I'm trying to tell you the things that we're not teaching, they're learning from our mistakes, and what they're doing just the opposite because they don't want to find themselves in a financial burden for the next 20 years. So that's one of the biggest things that take away from legacy building and generational wealth, the family structure. The family structure by itself is supposed to be a business unto itself.
I appreciate you saying that, Coach.
Business.
And it is a business, and that's why, like, I may not have the capital, the money to just say, okay, I'm gonna give everybody $100,000. But what I can do is I can buy books, I can get information like these things, little flashcards for the kids. It's for the kids, but I learn as we go. So when we're all learning how money actually works and what it's used for, then it may not show in my lifetime, but in their lifetime where they have this knowledge already, it'll show down the line, it'll show with their kids, and then you can establish some things so that it can change the next generation and the generation after that. So I could have talked about child support, could have talked about separate houses, could have talked about the new wife and all these things. We all know that. We all know how that terrifies people, and that when you look at it like, okay, well, you ain't bringing her. You remember on what's the purple color purple? She ain't my mammy, and hit her upside the head with brick. See, we all could feel that, like, yeah, because such and such he bringing his wife around and this, that, and other. But if we learn how to be a husband, learn how to be a wife beforehand, and knowing that this thing, it ain't about you sowing your raw oats. It's like Coach said, it's a business, and a business has to flourish. A business has to grow. A business has to come to the point where we understand who the head is of the business. Now, when we multiply, it edifies not just the people that's in the business, but everybody that's encircling the business. Let's see. Most importantly, community is largely focused on the world and not the word. Facts. We will fail every single time with that approach. Yes, when you try to establish yourself and your community and your family on worldly principles, you'll get worldly results. And so when the worldly happens in your household and in your family structure, you should have saw it coming, especially if you're a person, you say you're in the word, you say you're a person following after it. So I love this conversation, and it can go on for hours. And what we're going to do, we just going to rotate this thing on with our final thoughts, and we will go Unc, Coach, Gaddy, and I'll close it out.
Divorced at 50. Why starting over terrifies men. what we've been talking about for the last 90 minutes. If you find yourself a 50-year-old man and you are about to go through divorce or find yourself on the other side of the divorce or get ready to go through a divorce or something like that, please reach out to your wolf pack. Reach out to your boys, your homeboys, and your communities, your support system, or something like that. Because going through a divorce, going through a divorce is, especially if it's your first time and you're 50, it is full of ups and downs. There's a lot of different things that goes on. Coach talks about, he says the words ebbs and flows. The the journey through the divorce from the start to the end is definitely a process. If you are a man and you have been divorced for some time and you are still divorced and stuff like this, um, it's kind of, I guess I would just say, make sure that you are not make sure, but hopefully you're spending your time figuring out your purpose or living your best life or whatever like this. I guess what I mean, I want to say is take advantage of the time that you do have. If you want somebody, then go out there and get that person. If you don't, then that's fine too. But again, divorce at 50, if you are find yourself a man around this age and stuff like this, and you are going through divorce, please reach out. Please seek some sort of help and support or something like that because it can definitely be challenging. And that is my final.
I would. So I love this conversation. I think conversations like this has the potential to do some amazing things. Like if I had this in my younger, 19, 20 years old, I would have learned a lot. I would have learned a lot of what to do in preparation, not necessarily for divorce, but in preparation for a healthy marriage. I think a lot of times we need to understand some of the things that cause something to fail so that we can understand some safeguards that we can put up to ensure that it's successful. So for me, when we start looking at being divorced at 50, why starting over terrifies men, well, first and foremost, you're not starting over. You're starting exactly where you are. And where you are is far more knowledgeable than where you were when you first got married. Look at yourself. Ask yourself, what did you learn about yourself throughout the entirety of this process while being married, while going through the trials and tribulations before you got to the end? And then, as you identify those things that you learn about yourself, what are some of the things that you need to change to become a better version of yourself? Right? It's not about what you're looking to get into moving forward. It's you getting to the point to where you're becoming the best version of yourself, so that when relationship presents itself at a later point in time, you are better postured, you're better prepared, and you're suitable to be that man that you need to be for that relationship. And that would be my final thought.
Man, first, if I ever go after Coach again, I'm gonna need Coach to send me his final thought points first. So there's something left for me to say. I'm joking. I love you, brothers. Listen, uh, divorce at 50, why starting over terrifies men. I think I do agree with Coach that one, we're not starting over. You are continuing life where you are, and I understand that the relationship is starting over. But I think some of the things that plagues men in men heads is, did we learn from the relationship how to have a relationship? I think we always talk about how to handle divorce, but no one taught us young how to get married. Yeah, we can go down to the court, get an application, find a minister, walk down the aisle. You ain't even got to have a ceremony. But do I know myself enough to know that you are compatible with me, or do I just feel good with you? And so I decide to marry you. Or you was my high school sweetheart, and since you stuck with me in high school, I'm gonna marry you. Or you look good, or whatever the case may be. But we didn't. Did we learn from that marriage how to get married? And so, therefore, am I going to make the same mistake? Because some of us tend to go through cycles in life with people over and over again because we didn't learn. Then, two, if I feel like I was betrayed or broken or mistreated, have I learned to trust others again? Do I trust women now? Do I know what someone's motive is when they come come into my life? And then two, did I trust myself? Because maybe I blame myself. Maybe I feel like I didn't know what I needed to do to be a husband. And so the marriage failed on me, because society nine times out of 10 tells us that when a marriage is broken up, we automatically say, what did the man do wrong? Maybe I internalized that. What did I do wrong? Maybe I don't know what I did wrong, so I don't know if I can fix it. And so there's so many different avenues we can address with this. But what I do know is that you can move on with life, whether that's in a new relationship or whether that's alone. But get to know yourself in the Most High, so that you can grow towards who you are, not towards what others want you to be. Because if you get into another relationship, you'll find yourself being molded into that relationship, into that person, that once again, you find yourself not knowing who you are when the dust settles. That's all I have.
I love it. I couldn't say it any better. I think while starting over terrifies men, I think starting over terrifies males who don't necessarily know who they are, and who their maker is. I think when you know who you are, there tends to come a certain maturity about what's going on in your life and where you are at this point in life. I think that I was a medic for 22 years in the military. And as a medic, when we would come upon a casualty in the battlefield, the first thing that we would do was, if they had a wound or if we saw blood, we had to expose the wound. Sometimes we got to get to the point to where we take off our armor, so that we can expose where these hurts are, so that we can find a trusted person to look and see, like, man, how can we heal from these things that we've gone through? And after the healing process has taken place, then you can start to become that person that's not terrified to move forward, but willing and able to move forward, as Tawami said, whether that's with someone or alone. Because I think first and foremost, you have to know who you are and who you are in Christ before you could just tag along with somebody and just say, okay, I'm in a new relationship. I come whole first and foremost. I'm not coming so someone else can piece me together. And that's what's wrong with most of us. We find ourselves finding people that are piecing situations together and piecing things together. And then we find trauma bonds, or whatever you want to call it, and all these things where we can relate, instead of finding the person that actually comes together so that we can make this business of a relationship work to where it's fruitful. So I appreciate everybody coming. I appreciate the chat. Fellas, you guys came and you did what you did, and I'm loving it. I love the conversation. Sometimes it's I was always taught that tough meat makes its own gravy, and some of this conversation was tough, but it made its own gravy, and it's something that I can take and I can look within and say, man, you still have some work to do, because I know none of us are perfect. That includes me, and we all have some work to do. So continue to strive to be that better person and do the work on yourself, so that you won't have to look for somebody else to complete you. You know where we'll be. It's been in the chat all night. So you know where we are on Tuesdays. You know where we are on Sundays, on Fridays. Be there. Make sure you support. Make sure you come in and get involved. And on Sunday, I think it's on Tawami. We'll be on Tawami's page Sunday morning over on TikTok. And then Coach has the Sunday school after that. So make sure you come in and support. Sorry it took so long. Appreciate it. You guys staying in with us. Until next time.